Okay, next, talk about breaking a string into tokens. It's called tokenization. And essentially what it does, it's like a delimited list, like a comma-separated values file that you can open in Excel. This is a delimiter, and you can break that list by its delimiter. In the case of split, it converts the delimited list into into a single-dimensional array, a one-dimensional array. This becomes very useful when we start looking at Web 2.0 and JSON later on in the class and how it works. You can split something on anything you want, and it's very useful. The substring method will also allow you to pull parts of a string out. It doesn't create arrays, it just creates a new string from the portion it pulls out. Okay, so in this next example, we'll look at it and what it does. So here you can type any word you want. Click split. And split in this case is actually doing it based on a space, I believe. But you can really split it on anything you want. So the split button pushed gets the input string, and the token we know is a space, and so it says creates a new string, or actually it's an array called tokens, that is equal to the split on the space. Now in this case, it's now using another method called join, and join is just the opposite of split. It takes an array and creates a string out of it and allows you to tell it what token to use. So it goes from an array back to a delimited list. And you can use a different delimiter. In this case, it's using the new line character as a delimited list. And so this is an easy way of basically replacing all the spaces with the new line character. And then outputs it. And in the very last one here, we have the output string value is equal to the input string dot substring starting in 0 and going 10, or the first 10 characters of the string, and outputting it. And when we look at that, that's what we get. We had Mary had a, the first 10 characters. In this example, Mary had a little lamb, and so it now goes from being delimited by a space to being delimited by a new line character. Okay, so the delimited string, again, methods return substring starting at 0 in this example, but not including the ending string 10 in this example. So it's starting with 0, and it doesn't include 10. So it's really 0 to 9. I don't know why they just don't do it that way, but they don't. If the ending index is greater than the length of the string, the substring returned includes characters from the starting index to the end of the original string. Alright. Any questions on that before we go on to the date object? Okay, date object. And we'd use the date object. If we have time later, can you show how to output that to an ordered list rather than a... Yeah, we can do that. We can modify it. Most methods have a... So the date object, and I think we've used the date object before, when you create it, by default, it'll just give you an object that contains the current date and time with some helpful methods for working with date and time, including every component of the date and time from the year down to the millisecond. So you get all kinds of parts of it. So working with dates and times can be very tricky, especially when you're trying to do comparisons or trying to add a day, subtract a day, looking for ranges of dates. It can get very complicated. So the date object is very useful. And it's got a bunch of methods. GetDate returns a number from 1 to 31, which is really the day of the month. So it's not the date, it's really the day of the month. Then get UTC date is just the universal time, which used to be called Greenwich Mean Time. So you can either get local date or you can get it based on the international date and time. Same thing with day. It gets you the day of the week. This can get a little confusing, from 0 representing Sunday to 6 representing Saturday. Get full year will again get you the full year, which should be like 2012. And UTC full year would be based on Greenwich Mean Time. Usually they'll be the same, but obviously there's a 7-hour difference. So 17 hours out of the day would be the same as local, but for 7 hours it would be different. Hours would be different though, because now it would be local versus UTC time. The milliseconds would be, a millisecond is a thousandth of a second, so it's anywhere from 0 to 999. And computers work in in the time that 1 second passes, a computer can execute 1,000 commands. So computers work at the millisecond level of time. That's why they're so fast. Same thing with minutes and UTC minutes, or the month, which would be the month, 0 for January, 11 for December. Seconds, same thing. As minutes, 0 to 59. Get time returns the number of milliseconds from January 1, 1970, and the time in the date object. So that basically the way date and time is stored is by taking a base time, date and time, which would be midnight of January 1, 1970, and literally adding milliseconds to it. And that's how, internally, time is stored as a long, which is like a double int. So it's 8 bytes. And 8 bytes is enough, if you figured it out, to store milliseconds from 1970 until, I think, somewhere in 2050 or something like that. Then they've got to figure something out, just like Y2K. You can also get the offset on the time zone, which can be useful. You can set the date. There's objects for setting the date as well. And all the different parts of the date and time you can set, which is useful when you want to change times. Set minutes, month, seconds, they all work pretty much at the same time. You can give a number of milliseconds, although that's kind of hard to calculate to set the time. And to local string, which will return a nicely dated, formatted date time string in local time. There's a two string method as well, I'm sure. To UTC string. And toString returns basically a nice formatted string version of it. The time in number of milliseconds, it's the same as get time. Okay, parse, date method parse receives as an argument a string representing a date and time and returns the number of milliseconds since midnight, the specified date and time. So it's got to be in a certain format, which you'll see in a moment. Returns the number of milliseconds between midnight. It's the same thing method, UTC. Just does it in UTC time. Okay, so in this next example, which is 4, I think. Okay. So we can see what we're doing is we create a time, current, is doing it based solely on the current date and time of your system, and it's outputting all the different values. The toString, what you'd get with toString, which is a nicely formatted string, local string, UTC string, which will be the time in, well, it's already Wednesday over there, so it looks like 1:40 in the morning over in England there. And then the get values for the get date is the 30th day of the month. 2 is a day of the week, that's Tuesday. Month is 9, but it's 0 base, so you'd have to add 1 to that to get to 10 for October. The full year is 2012. There's the time, get time. That's the number of milliseconds from 1970, January 1, 1970. If you can look at it, it's a pretty large number. I mean, that's 651, 647 million. So it's 1.3 trillion, it looks like. Oh, yeah, something like that. 1,351 billion. So it's quite a large number. But a double, this is 1.3 trillion. So that's why you have to use something other than an int. An int would only go up to 4 billion unsigned. So you'd have to use a double, which would be, 4 billion squared or something like that. So more than, I can't even imagine how big that number is. Same thing, okay, with hours and minutes and seconds and all that sort of thing. Go down a little further. You can, as we see here, create a date based on arguments you pass in. So that's year is 2007, month is February, day of the month is the 18th. The hour looks like it's 5, the minutes 5, I'm sorry, the hour 1, the minutes 5, the seconds and milliseconds? Probably. So that works out to be, March 18th. How did we get March 18th, because that 2 is not February, that 2 is the 3rd month, so it's March. Yeah. That's how you get that. Now, time zone offset is usually the number of hours from Greenwich Mean Time. So that would be 7 in our case, I'm pretty sure. Well, there says 420. That might be in minutes. If you divided that by 60, you get 7 hours. Yeah, it's in minutes. It looks like it is in minutes. Divide by 60, you get 7 hours. And that is the time difference from California to Greenwich Mean Time. All right. Alright, so we looked at this, all the different methods you're calling. Alright, questions so far on any of this? Dates and strings are commonly used. Numbers and booleans less commonly used, but you can use them. For boolean, it's really pretty simple. It's just true and false. I've never really needed to use a boolean, to be honest with you. It's pretty straightforward to do it with just a true and false. And I mean, toString is just going to return true or false value. Oh, it's a very simple object, so simple I just never really bothered to use it. Number you might use, because there are some values to doing that to force something to be an actual number. Although you could always force it to be a number anyway, just by assigning a 0 to the value. But you get some values. You get some, there's some value in using a number object. ToString obviously we just convert it to a string. This returns a numeric value, whatever it happens to be. And there's some to, give some constants for min and max value, and whether it's a number or not, where you can go to positive infinity or negative infinity. It's a value less than number.max value. Okay, so the document object, which we've used before, but we'll talk about a little bit more now. It's provided by the browser and allows JavaScript code to manipulate the current document in the browser. The ones you're going to use the most are get element by ID. We'll use that a lot. We've used that already in a number of the examples, and this is why we put an ID tag ID on our input field, is it allows you to simply get what we call a handle on an object anywhere on the form, and that's important because once you get it a handle, it's like grabbing a hand of it, grabbing it literally. That's why they say getting a handle. Then you can change it. Change the text, change the color, make it visible, invisible, move it, whatever you want to do. So get element by ID is important because it allows you to start manipulating it that way. You can also get it by the name, where you see get element by tag name. You can do it by name as well. You can do that, but usually it's preferred to use the ID. Okay, so this is going to be an interesting example. Favorite Twitter searches. Before HTML5, websites could store only small amounts of text data based on the user's computer using cookies. A cookie is a value pair in which each key has a corresponding value. The key and value are both strings. Cookies are stored by the browser on the user's computer to maintain client-specific information during and between browser sessions. So I'm sure you've heard of the term cookies before. Anyone not hear the term cookies? It's basically a temporary file is what it is. It's an interesting term for a temporary file that is quarantined to a specific location on your computer because it's a public internet site creating it. That's really what it is. Some websites use cookies to record user preferences or other information that they can retrieve during a client's subsequent visits. A lot of web email systems like Yahoo and Gmail used to use them. I don't know if they still do, but they used to use them. When a user visits a website, the browser locates any cookies written by that website and sends them directly to the server. Cookies may be accessed only by the web server and scripts of the website from which the cookies originate. So, there's problems with cookies. They're extremely limited in size. Cookies cannot store entire documents. If the user browses the same site from multiple tabs, all those sites' cookies are shared by the pages of that tab, so they're not really separated. So now we're going to take a look at something called local storage and session storage. Before we do that, though, I want to take just a quick break, about a 5-minute break.